In this lecture, we're going to look at the development of the European Union, which we see kind of develop in the years following World War II, how that grew into the entity it is today, and the challenges it faced over the years following World War II and beyond. So let's get into it. So again, going back to World War II, as we've done often in this unit, we need to look at what the leaders of Western Europe wanted to do after the war. Again, as we've talked about, Europe was destroyed across the board from capitalist Western Europe to communist Eastern Europe. A process of rebuilding had to occur in most of these countries. And we see, even before the end of World War II, discussion between major players in European affairs about what this new European order would look like. Again, it becomes a common theme in this unit and in the decades following World War II that when you have economic cooperation and countries working together, you're less likely to have conflict and war. When you have isolationism and tendencies like that, that's when wars are more likely to begin. So you see a spirit of cooperation really kind of rise up in a lot of these countries. You also see the beginning of the Cold War in this same period, right? We've talked about how we have capitalist United States and communist Soviet Union kind of pitching their plans to the different countries, different leaders of Europe, trying to get people on board as far as what they want and what they want to see happen. One such disagreement comes up in the Bretton Woods Conference that we see in 1944, and the year prior to the end of World War II. We see discussion between these major European powers about how the economies of these nations will look like, what they will kind of base their economies on, what kind of free trade and togetherness that we'll see between these countries. Again, just like we saw with the Marshall Plan, we see the Soviets kind of back out of the deal. They do not want to be tied to international capitalism. They want to kind of work towards communist goals with communist allies rather than capitalist allies. And again, they don't want to be tied to these banks and these funds, these groups that are being developed, such as the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, etc., that we're going to see develop and really, in some cases, really wreck the developing world in the 20th and 21st centuries. Jumping ahead a few years, we talked about the Marshall Plan and how that more or less ties Western Europe together with capitalist America. It prevents the spread of communism in Western Europe, alongside the actions of the CIA within Europe as well. That does contribute to this as well. But we really see the Marshall Plan and all of the funds that are dished out of the Marshall Plan. That really does help bring Western Europe together and kind of bring them together in this capitalist economic cooperation. We see a European Economic Council of Cooperation develop that again helps these countries come together and work together to develop their capitalist systems and their governments and their economies to again not only rebuild but kind of form a more cohesive grouping. By the 1950s, we see the first iteration of the European Union and the European Coal and Steel Community. It was found between West Germany, the capitalist West Germany, not the communist East Germany that was dominated by the Soviets and communism. But we see West Germany, Italy, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg join together into this European coal and steel community. This is not the first time we've really seen European states kind of join together in a economic community. If we go back to the Zollverein that helped unify Germany, those different Germanic states kind of joined together in the Zollverein to kind of eliminate trade barriers and tariffs. We see a similar thing happen here too between these different European nations. However, this is different. These countries had different nationalities, languages, governments in some cases. So you're really seeing something kind of different happen here. It isn't focused on on wide economic goals, but it is based around two important goods, coal and steel, which help create industrialized economies. Moving on, a few years later, we see the Treaty of Rome signed, which expand this market again between Belgium, France, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. They create the European Community Common Market, which allows the trading of a wide variety of goods, not just coal and steel. So this process is being built and expanded upon. Eventually, the goal becomes with the development of the European Union is to create a single market that, getting rid of all these tariffs and trade barriers. The single market that could be created could challenge the economic power of America, because again, America is a superpower. The Soviet Union is a superpower. A small European nation, even one of the bigger ones such as France or Germany, West Germany, that is, they cannot compete with the economic dominance of America. So by joining together in a single union, these countries could work together, collaborate, and develop organized economic systems that could challenge the economic power of America. So, what do you see Europe look like? What do you see happening as it develops? So, again, the European Common Market changes its name to the European Union in 1993, and it has some goals that it sets about in accomplishing. Some of them are fully accomplished and brought in, some of them are not. So, what do we see happen? The main goal, again, is to create a economic power that can challenge or rival the power of America. So the European Union calls for the free movement of people, of capital, money that banks could use, and services. So you could be a worker that's a member of one EU state, such as Portugal, and you can go easily move to another EU state, such as France, and live and work there and earn money. The goal also is to create a single currency that could be used across the continent and in any EU member state. So again, if you are a worker in Portugal, a country that's traditionally been one of the poor European countries, you could earn money in Portugal and spend it in France. Or you could move to Portugal, work in France, and then go back to Portugal and spend it there. So the goal of the EU is to create a free-flowing system that has lots of protections for European businesses, but within Europe allows for easy movement of capital, easy movement of people. Not every country in the EU is a part of the Eurozone, which is where the euro currency can be used. And different countries have different things that they're a part of. For example, Britain famously left the European Union. They never got rid of their currency, the pound. They kept the pound, and at times thought about getting the euro, but there was never a really strong force for it. But as of 2016, they even left the European Union and had to pay a hefty trade consequence because of that. So being a member of an EU state post 1993 calls for strict financial rules and processes, and it kind of ties your economies together. We'll talk about, on the next slide, that, if one country is starting to have an economic crisis, that can easily spread to the rest of Europe. But there's processes and barriers in place to kind of prevent a wide-scale economic collapse, hopefully. It's still a relatively new system, but we'll see if this continues to hold true. So, who's in favor of this? Generally speaking, the elites, the capitalist elites, are for free markets, free trade, etc. So they're going to be for this. They're for the EU treaty. They're for the Maastricht Treaty that kind of standardizes these financial processes. Again, the idea is when you have countries working together, trading together, and even using the same currency, you're far less likely to see them fight one another, which more or less has been the case. Who's against the EU? Ordinary people have been opposed to it. Leftists have been opposed to it. And even right-wing nationalists have been opposed to it. It kind of depends on the person's economic background and what they believe. But a lot of these people are relatively susceptible to propaganda saying that, these EU bureaucrats in Brussels, Belgium, are dictating what you can eat, what you can do, what kind of jobs you can have, and that takes a hold on people. It worked in Britain, and it works in other places especially where there's right-wing extremism. Leftists are mostly opposed to it, not because of the cooperation, but because it entrenches the power of the capitalist ruling class, and makes the lives of workers more difficult for the most part. However, you do see these EU governments kind of join forces and impose some of these government spending programs that limit spending on social benefits, on healthcare spending, and cutting budgets across the board that hurt the lives of the average European. These austerity measures that have been in place in some of these cases do hurt workers, which is another reason why leftists are opposed to it. In addition to right-wing nationalists who, again, want nationalist independence for their country. With the Maastricht Treaty passed in 2002, again, we see euros replacing Eurozone currencies starting in 2002. And with the Treaty of Lisbon in 2007, it streamlines the process to make the bureaucracy more efficient. As of 2019, we see the EU home to 500 million citizens. Again, they're somewhat achieving their goal, more or less achieving their goal of rivaling the population size of America at least. It's home to 28 countries from former East Bloc nations in the East Bloc to Western Europe. And again, just in 70 years, you kind of see a European Union grow from a destroyed, war-torn continent into a connected community, where in which you have most of Europe inside the European Union. However, that has not stopped the European Union from facing different problems. Like I said on the last slide, we have seen instances and examples of crises in the European Union. With the global economic crash in 2008, we see income inequality rise. We see people lose their job, lose their work. And this economic collapse that we saw partially in our country spread over to Europe, and it hit a lot of Eastern and Western Europe. Countries that were heavily impacted were Spain, Portugal, and Greece, with Britain also facing a fair amount of it due to its role in being a part of the EU at that time and having a heavy financial sector that was involved. This was the 2008 euro crisis, and we see the European Union economy on the brink of collapse. With these different banks involved and connected to one another, we see tough measures that need to have been that were taken by these countries in order to kind of get these government budgets back in check. Again, what happened again here, more or less, you have people losing their jobs. When people lose their jobs, they can't pay taxes and they can't really support the government that they're living under. In addition, a lot of these governments weren't really collecting high enough taxes to support the social safety nets and the social welfare programs that we saw in these nations. They had low retirement ages, wide healthcare systems, wide pension systems that were in place, and all these things contributed to people not working as much as, critics would say, living easier lives and not paying a lot in taxes, thus creating big economic burdens on their country's budgets. At least, again, that's from a Western capitalist perspective. So we see Germany and France, the leaders of the EU, kind of step into these countries and say, you got to fix your governments. You have to take these loans from us, and you have to enact austerity measures. You need to raise retirement ages. You need to collect more taxes. You need to cut pensions and Social Security benefits. Again, taking things away from the workers that workers have, fought and died for over the years. This goes through, and it goes through a series of collective difficulties, but eventually these austerity measures are put in place, which leads to a left-wing revolt. We see left-wing parties come into some of these countries, such as in Greece, wanting to bring back some of these social benefits. Again, pensions, retirement funds, education, healthcare, wanting to pay these back in and kind of get these properly funded again. But that has still kind of been a mixed bag of results. Austerity, which again is getting the government out of helping people, again, not letting people retire earlier, making people pay more for healthcare. That stuff has been put in place and has been kept in place more or less since this crisis. One last crisis you should know is the Brexit crisis of 2016. Again, Britain was in the EU, but it was not a member of the Eurozone, and was somewhat tied to the economy of the EU, but was not entirely tied to it. But we see lots of right-wing propaganda flood into Britain, pressuring people, British people, that they should leave the EU because they'll have more economic freedom and more prosperity, even though, again, Britain is in the EU, so it can trade and get rid of tariffs and make more money trading and selling their goods rather than being dependent on this EU system, which is what, some right-wing propagandists were saying. So this debate happens, there's a vote, and the British people vote to leave the EU. They vote for Brexit. This famous bus right here will save 350 million pounds a week if we leave the EU, and we can put that into our National Health Service. That was a massive propagandic lie. It did not happen. Whatever money they did save from leaving the EU, They did not. The politicians that ran Britain at the time and still today have not put that money back into the NHS. So it's been years of lies that have cost many British people economic freedom and stability. So again, the story of the EU is that it was built on cooperation and capitalistic integration, but over the years, people have started to not trust it and view it as a mechanism for evil. So that's the European Union in a nutshell, how it was created and some of the challenges it faces. Hopefully, this was helpful for you. See you next time.